Hi, my name is Kimberly, and I am a 35-year-old operations manager at a prominent bank in the city. From my corner office on the 25th floor, I have a panoramic view of the bustling streets and soaring skyscrapers that make up our vibrant downtown. It's early morning, the sun just peeking over the horizon, casting a golden glow that bathes my desk in warm light. This moment, with my coffee in hand and the city coming to life below, is one of the rare times I allow myself a pause in my otherwise hectic life. Truth be told, work is my life. It's my passion and my driving force, but it's also my greatest excuse. It keeps me from facing the reality that beyond these glass walls, my personal life is practically non-existent. Not that I mind. There's a certain thrill in closing deals and solving problems that I haven't quite found anywhere else. So here I am, at the peak of my career, feeling both fulfilled and utterly consumed by my work. It's a paradox I've come to accept, one that defines not just my days, but my identity. And as much as I thrive in this environment, I often wonder about the sacrifices I've made for this success. Is it worth it? I've always thought so, but that was before Edward walked into my life, challenging every notion I had about what it means to have it all. It was a rare Friday night when I decided to step out of my routine and join a couple of friends for dinner. We chose a quaint little Italian restaurant, its cozy ambience a stark contrast to the sleek, modern lines of my office. As we laughed and shared stories over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, I felt a part of me unwind, a side of myself I often neglected in the rush of my professional life. Halfway through the evening, Sarah, a friend I've known since college and one of the few who could drag me away from work, leaned in with a mischievous grin. "Kimberly, there's someone I want you to meet. He's here tonight, and I think you'll like him." Before I could protest, she was waving someone over. That's when I first saw Edward. He approached our table with a confident stride, his smile easy and genuine. "Hi, Kimberly, I'm Edward. Sarah has told me a lot about you," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, his demeanor calm and self-assured. We made small talk, and I found myself intrigued by his openness and straightforward nature. Edward was an elementary school teacher, passionate about his work and, unlike me, very clear about his personal life goals. He didn't shy away from discussing his future. He wanted a family, a home filled with love and laughter, a stark contrast to my own uncertain views on such matters. Despite myself, I was drawn to his clarity and warmth. "I'm not really looking for anything serious," I admitted as our conversation deepened. "My job doesn't leave much room for anything else." "I understand that," Edward replied, his eyes never leaving mine. "But I believe in making room for the important things or people if they come along. And I'm patient. I know what I want, and I'm willing to wait for the right moment." As the evening wound down and we all said our goodbyes, Edward asked if he could see me again. Something in his earnest gaze made me hesitate, a flutter of anticipation stirring in my chest. Against my better judgment, fueled perhaps by the wine or his unwavering sincerity, I found myself agreeing. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind raced. Edward was everything I typically avoided: commitment, clear domestic aspirations, a life mapped out towards a family. And yet, there was a part of me, perhaps a part I'd long ignored, that wondered what it might be like to explore a path so different from my own. Little did I know, agreeing to see Edward again would be the first step toward a journey that would challenge every preconceived notion I held dear, a journey that would teach me more about myself than I could have ever imagined. Over the next few months, my relationship with Edward evolved in ways I hadn't anticipated. Our dates became a regular part of my schedule, a welcome deviation from my endless cycle of meetings and reports. Edward had a way of making everything feel simple, a contrast to the complexities of my career. He would take me to quiet parks, art galleries, and sometimes we'd just walk the city streets, talking about everything and nothing. As our third year together approached, Edward's intentions remained clear. His commitment was not just in words, but in actions, whether it was his careful attention during my stressful days or his consistent effort to meet me halfway in everything. Yet, his life certainty clashed with my career-driven uncertainties. I admired his dedication to his teaching and his dreams of family, but I couldn't shake off the fear that embracing this part of life with Edward meant sacrificing the career I had worked so hard to build. One evening, as we watched the sunset from the deck of his apartment, Edward brought up the topic of marriage again. "Kimberly, I know this isn't easy for you," he began, his voice gentle. "I love you, and while I hope for a future with you, I don't want to push you into a decision that doesn't feel right." His sincerity struck a chord in me. Here was a man who truly understood me, who was willing to accommodate the complexities of my life without forcing his expectations on me. It was then I realized that my fears of losing my identity to marriage were unfounded with someone like Edward. He wasn't asking me to give up my dreams. He was asking to be a part of them. Taking a deep breath, I made a decision that would change my life. "Yes," I said, the word feeling both terrifying and exhilarating. "Yes, I will marry you." His face lit up with a smile that warmed my heart, and in that moment, I felt a shift in our relationship. We were no longer just two people in love. We were partners, stepping into a future together. Our wedding was a beautiful, albeit simple, affair. It was a blend of our personalities, understated yet elegant, much like how we approached our life together. However, the initial bliss of marriage began to fade as we settled into our routines. Edward, who had once shared the household responsibilities, slowly began to retreat from them. At first, it was subtle, a forgotten chore here, a neglected duty there. But soon, it became apparent that the egalitarian partnership I had envisioned was slipping away. Edward's once encouraging support of my career began to wane as well. He grew resentful of the time my job demanded, and his once endearing patience turned into quiet frustration. Our discussions about sharing responsibilities led to arguments, with Edward asserting that his job was just as taxing and that I should take on more at home. As months turned into a year, I found myself bearing the brunt of not only my job's demands, but also our homes. The partnership I had so cherished seemed to be unbalancing, tilting towards expectations I had feared but hoped would never materialize. This growing disparity laid the groundwork for deeper issues that neither of us had anticipated, issues that would challenge the very foundation of our marriage. As our first anniversary approached, the dynamic in our marriage had shifted palpably. The early days of shared laughter and mutual support seemed like distant memories, replaced now by a tension that threaded through our daily interactions. Edward's transformation was gradual but undeniable. The man who once preached about partnership and shared responsibilities had slowly receded into a role that left me carrying the bulk of our mutual burdens. One evening, as I prepared dinner after a long day at work, Edward sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone. I had hoped we could use this time to reconnect, to perhaps reminisce about our first year together and rekindle some of the joy we had lost. Instead, there was a cold silence, one that I finally broke. "Edward, we need to talk about the household chores," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I feel like I'm handling everything on my own." We agreed to share these responsibilities. Edward looked up, his expression one of annoyance. "Kim, you know how stressful my job is. Kids need constant attention, and it's draining. I think it's only fair that you handle things at home since your job is more flexible." I was stunned. My job was anything but flexible, filled with unexpected crises and demands that often stretched into the wee hours. I realized then that Edward's perception of my career, and perhaps of me, had changed, or maybe he had never understood at all. The situation deteriorated further when I discovered that Edward had started giving his entire salary to his parents. "They need it more than we do," he said when I confronted him about our finances. "It's my duty to support them." While I respected his desire to help his family, IT placed an undue strain on me, as I was now solely responsible for our financial stability. The weight of our mortgage, bills, and daily expenses rested on my shoulders alone. The strain reached a breaking point when Edward made a unilateral decision that threatened to unravel everything I had worked for. He had agreed to lend a significant amount of our savings to his brother, William, to help start a new business venture, a decision made without my knowledge or consent. I learned about it one evening when I overheard Edward discussing the details on the phone. I felt a mix of betrayal and disbelief. Why would you commit our savings to something so risky without even talking to me first? I demanded after he had ended the call. Edward's response was defensive. It's a great opportunity for William, and I want to support him. Why can't you just trust my judgment? This was not the partnership I had envisioned on our wedding day. It was clear that Edward's priorities had shifted dramatically, focusing more on his own family's needs than on our mutual well-being. The man I had married, who had once spoken so earnestly about our future together, now seemed like a stranger, making decisions that affected both of us with no regard for my input. As I lay in bed that night, the distance between us more profound than the physical space, I realized that something had to change. I could not live in the shadows of unmet expectations and broken promises. I needed to reclaim my independence, my voice, and the respect that I deserved in our marriage. The path forward was daunting, but necessary. I had to confront the reality of our faltering relationship and decide how much of myself I was willing to sacrifice for a marriage that was drifting farther from what I had believed it would be. The tension in our home grew palpable, a constant undercurrent to our daily lives. I began to feel more like a caretaker than a partner, handling our finances, home, and the emotional labor of keeping our relationship from crumbling. It became increasingly clear that Edward's commitment to his family's needs was overshadowing our own needs as a couple. One chilly evening, as I was sorting through our financial statements, I stumbled upon transactions that confirmed my worst fears. Not only had Edward committed a substantial portion of our savings to his brother's business venture, but he had also planned further investments without any discussion with me. My heart raced as the implications of his decision sank in decisions that could jeopardize our financial future. The following weekend, I confronted Edward. I needed him to understand the gravity of his actions and how betrayed I felt. Edward, we need to talk about your financial decisions involving your brother, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Edward's reaction was dismissive. Kimberly, I'm supporting my brother because family supports each other. We can make more money, but family is forever. But what about our family, Edward? Our plans? You're making major financial decisions without even involving me. That's not what partners do. My frustration was mounting, and it was difficult to keep my composure. Edward shrugged, a gesture that felt like a dismissal of my concerns. I thought you'd be supportive. You always manage to find a way through your business challenges. Why not this? That night, I lay awake, the gap between us widening. His words echoed in my mind, a stark reminder of how disconnected we had become. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respect, trust, and partnership, all of which were eroding away under the weight of unspoken grievances and unilateral decisions. The realization hit me hard. I was losing myself, my values, and my independence to a marriage that was fundamentally unbalanced. The love and respect I once had for Edward were waning, replaced by resentment and disillusionment. Determined to reclaim my life, I reached out to a lawyer the next day. The decision to file for divorce was agonizing, but necessary. Edward's reaction was a mix of anger and disbelief. He couldn't understand why I wouldn't support his decisions or stand by his side as he had expected. As the divorce proceedings began, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. The process was swift, propelled by my resolve and Edward's realization that reconciliation was beyond reach. I secured my financial assets, ensuring that my future would not be compromised by further unilateral decisions. The finality of the divorce brought a sense of closure, but also a deep introspection about what I truly valued in life and relationships. I moved into a new apartment, a space that I could call my own, free from the shadows of a marriage that had taught me more about myself than I had ever anticipated. In the quiet of my new beginning, I realized the importance of balance, not just in work, but in love, respect, and partnership. I was ready to rebuild, to find harmony in both my personal and professional life, and to approach future relationships with a newfound clarity and self-respect. The lessons were hard-earned, but they were mine, and they would guide me forward into a future I would navigate on my own terms. Settling into my new apartment, I was surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked, but within these walls, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for too long. My new home was smaller, the neighborhood quieter, and from my window, I could see the park where families gathered, children played, and life unfolded in simple, joyful episodes. It was a fresh canvas, and I was ready to paint my new beginning with strokes of independence and self-discovery. As I sipped my morning coffee, the warmth of the mug in my hands felt like a gentle reminder of my newfound autonomy. The divorce, although painful, had been swift, a testament to my decisive action once I had made up my mind. Edward had tried to reach out, a few emails, several calls, apologies mingled with pleas for another chance. But something within me had shifted irrevocably. I needed to protect the peace I had fought so hard to regain. The lessons from my marriage were still fresh, often wandering through my thoughts like uninvited guests. I pondered over what I had sacrificed and what I had gained. The career I loved had once been a refuge, but it had also been a barrier, shielding me from facing the truths about my personal life. Now, it was time to find a balance, to ensure that my work did not consume me, nor define me entirely. Re-engaging with my career, I approached my responsibilities with a renewed vigor and a clearer boundary between my professional and personal life. My colleagues noticed the change. "Kimberly seems different, more grounded," they would whisper. And they were right. I was more present, more involved in the moments that mattered, both at work and outside of it. In this new chapter, I also rediscovered passions I had neglected, reading for pleasure, exploring photography, and even joining a local pottery class. Each activity was a step toward rediscovering who I was outside the confines of my previous identity as a wife and a high-powered manager. One crisp Saturday morning, as I strolled through the park, camera in hand, capturing the laughter of children and the serene landscapes, I realized how much I had missed these simple pleasures. It was during these moments of quiet reflection that I truly came to terms with my past and embraced my future. Months turned into a year, and as I built my new life, I also built new relationships, friendships that were rooted in mutual respect and shared interests. I was cautious, of course, about romantic involvement. The scars from my marriage were still healing, and I knew that trusting someone new would take time. Yet, life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. At a local art exhibit, I met Thomas, a fellow photography enthusiast. His gentle demeanor and insightful conversation sparked something within me that I thought had long since faded. We started as friends, two souls appreciating art and life's simpler joys, but as our friendship deepened, so did our connection. Standing in my living room, surrounded by photographs I had taken and pottery I had molded, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. I had created a life that was truly my own, filled with work I loved and people who brought joy into my daily existence. Looking forward, I was open to possibilities, to love, and to a future where my happiness was no longer tethered to someone else's decisions. Reflecting on my journey, I realized that the price of commitment wasn't just about what you give to others, but also what you owe to yourself. It was a lesson hard learned, but worth every moment of struggle. As I set my camera down and looked out at the setting sun, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be, ready to embrace whatever came next on my own terms.